Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is the Laverre Constrictors going up against the Holon Allies, and with only 3 rounds left to go and these two sides haven't done a look at their opening hands, let's have a look at this tale of the tape, because for the Holon Allies, they're in 11th place and they took that wooden crown last season and they do not want to take it back to back and become the first team to ever do so in the PokeType League TCG, whereas for the Constrictors, they're currently in 7th place, but they want to return to Victory Road after having missed out last season. But with all that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the Psychic decks? Will it be the Rainbow decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And starting off this match, it is the Ruins of Life deck from the Constrictors. They've got the Necrozma on the bench with the Phantom in the active spot. It is the Cubone from the Angel Grove deck of the Holon Allies going into their active spot as their only basic Pokemon. It is the big Malasada being pulled for the Constrictors, and they've already got the 2 Trevenants in hand. They send it over to the Allies and they do pull the Kiawe. They don't have a Marowak online, but they've got the Penny trying to capitalize on the supporter cards inside the deck of the Constrictors, including that Professor's Research, so they will draw an additional 2 cards, getting their second Flare, and they get the leftovers. Now this deck does produce a fire energy that we see being put onto Cubone, as well as those darkness energy that will be produced in the next turn. They are randomly generated, as it is the Shuppet being pulled for the Laverre Constrictors immediately going onto the bench. They do get a first of 2 energy onto the Phantom. A lot of setup here early on in game 1 of this 3-game series. The Umbreon being pulled for the Allies. They get a second energy on to the Cubone. Having a look through their hand, not much else they can do, so they go for the beat on the Phantom, getting that 30 damage, bringing Phantom down to 40 health. The Oricorio with that Spiteful Dance that only requires 1 energy being moved onto that final bench slot here for the Constrictors, a second energy onto Phantom. Now they can evolve it, but Trevenant does require 3 energy. And that's exactly what they're going to do, just in case a Marowak is pulled on the next turn for the Allies. They don't know whether or not there's one in hand, but there is one now, because that is exactly what happens. The Marowak is pulled, but it is the darkness energy being generated here, being produced in the energy zone, but they still need 1 more fire energy, and the Kiawe generates 2 for the Marowak, so it does get them, but they have to end their turn immediately. It is the second Oricorio being pulled for the Constrictors here. That rack down from Trevenant as they finally go on the offensive, 70 damage here onto the Marowak. The Allies, they need to pull a basic Pokemon, and they get the Eevee. This is perfect for them. That is exactly what they need. They've got the Umbreon in hand. They can go on the offensive here with the Marowak. Now it isn't a Alolan Marowak, and with that Burning Boomerang, they get 2 coin flips. For each heads, it does 70 damage. They get 140 damage here. They get 1. They only get 1, but they're also going to get the burn onto Trevenant, who has 20 health remaining, and the burn does exactly that, wiping Trevenant off the board. They don't care about the burn checkup, even though it does heal Trevenant, because that will not stop it from going into the discard pile, and the Allies take the first battle point here in game 1. And it is the first of 3 battle points here, but for each game a team wins, they do get 2 victory points counted towards the leaderboard, so all 3 games do count and are crucial. The Bayonet being pulled for the Constrictors moved onto the bench, as is the second Oricorio, and with the Spiteful Dance, having just lost a Pokemon, it would normally do an additional 60, but because it was the burn that took out the Trevenant, Oricorio only does 20 damage, whereas if it had been taken down by offensive damage from the Marowak, Oricorio would have been able to do 80 and take Marowak off the board. The Umbreon is online, getting its second energy here. There is that second Cubone that was just pulled, and it is moved on to the bench. And the Allies having a look at that Umbreon, they're having a look at the Burning Boomerang, and they're going to get the 2 Darkness energy off the Marowak to retreat it. They don't want to drop it from the game, and they are going to move Umbreon into the active spot. That Dark Binding does do 40 damage, but with the weakness of Oricorio, it does the additional 20, bringing Oricorio down to 10 health, and Oricorio is unable to attack either, as the second Shuppet is pulled for the Constrictors. The Constrictors need to think about how they want to approach this. And the Necrozma does require 4 energy. The Oricorio and the Bayonet, they only require 1 each, and they can retreat their active Oricorio, put in the full strength one into the active spot, getting that Spiteful Dance, as it was who takes the damage from the Umbreon that cannot go in the offensive. It is the Poison Barb though being pulled for the Allies here, and the Allies, they have got that Eevee bag that can boost the damage that Umbreon does by the additional 10. They've had that since the start, and now they're going to use it, which means they can take down this Oricoro with one hit. This Dark Binding going to do 50 damage, but again, that additional 20 thanks to the weakness, and the allies are doing everything they need to take game 1 here in this 3-game series. But now it is the second Oricoro being moved into the active spot, and again, that Spiteful Dance does an additional 60 damage if the previous Pokemon was taken down by damage from the opposing team. They go with the Guzma that's going to discard the Poison Barb from the Umbreon here. And they are going to play the big Malasada. They're trying to do everything they can to keep the Oricoro in the match. Mind you, that Cubone has enough firepower to take down 20 health, as it does do 30 damage with the beat, but they can't go for the Spiteful Dance. They've made a huge error. They've just moved the energy onto the Bayonet. They didn't put it onto the Oricoro. The allies are going to capitalize. The Constrictors thinking one turn too far, setting up the Bayonet and not the Oricoro. A massive error has caused them to take no points here in game 1. But with all that said, as we have our first table reset, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like and subscribe so don't miss out on any of the action in the PokeType League TCG. Now the Constrictors, they need to get their head in the game, as it is game 2. They've got the Morelull from their Forbidden Light deck. They've got the Necrozma on the bench, the Morelull in the active spot. The allies, they're going to be playing with their Tropical Takedown deck, and we can see the Eevee EX plus the regular Eevee. The Eevee EX going into the active spot, and if you're wondering why there is an EX card for the Holon Allies this season, they have been permitted to use an Eevee EX in each deck, but they have to evolve them at the earliest opportunity, regardless of if it benefits them or not. And this was so that they could capitalize on all the evolutions that were inside the Eevee Grove set. As the Beastite is pulled for the Constrictors, not much else they can do, so they send it over to the allies, who do pull the Vikavolt. Now this deck does generate water and lightning energy, first generating this water energy that goes onto the Eevee EX, and with that bite it can do 30 damage. And this may be the first time, one of the few rare times all season, that we've seen the allies actually start a game off with the Eevee EX by choice. As the Shiinotic is pulled for the Constrictors, they can get that online immediately, meaning that Morelull can outlast a hit from the Eevee EX, but again, they will have to evolve it on the next turn. They get the first energy onto the Shiinotic, they get the leftovers onto it as well, so it will be able to restore 10 health at the end of every turn of the Constrictors, plus that big Malasada already restoring the 10 health of Shiinotic, and with that Illuminate ability, they get a random Pokemon card out of their deck, being the Oricoros that are inside this deck. However, they choose to keep it in hand, as they're looking to clearly play that Illuminate on most turns to thin that deck very quickly. The Eevee bag being pulled for the allies, and they are going to go with the Vaporeon on to that active spot, who requires 2 more energy, but it doesn't need an additional water energy, only requiring 1, whereas that Glaceon in hand does require 2 water energy. And unfortunately, we can see that they are generating lightning energy at the moment. The Guzma being pulled for the Constrictors. It is the second energy onto the Shiinotic, that gentle slap, and not very gentle, doing 40 damage, but first the Illuminate, and they are going to get the Lunatone out of their deck here. They are actually going to move the Lunatone onto the bench, still keeping that Oricoro in hand. They've also got the Beast Wall and the Beastite, that do work well with Ultra Beast Pokemon, but only if the opposing side for the Beast Wall, if they haven't taken any points. The Penny being pulled for the allies as they continue to generate these lightning energy, and they are going to be able to capitalize on the Mallow of the Constrictors deck, but it's actually of no use to the allies here. And we can see they've also got the Sophocles in hand, who pairs perfectly with that Vikavolt that's in hand, but finally it will be Vaporeon with this Hyper Whirlpool, 70 damage onto the Shiinotic. And they get to flip a coin until they get tails. For each heads, a random energy is discarded from Shiinotic, but unfortunately they get a tail straight away, so that cuts it off immediately before Shiinotic loses any energy. They can go for another Illuminate, and they've just pulled the Lusamine. Lusamine can be used on Ultra Beast as well, as the Lunatone is pulled thanks to the Illuminate. And so what Lusamine does is when they play that, they can take up to 2 energy from the discarded energy and put it onto an Ultra Beast, keeping in mind that Necrozma does require 3 energy. That gentle slap onto Vaporeon, bringing it down to 40 health. The leftovers restoring 10 health for the Shiinotic as the electrical cord is pulled for the allies. They're thinking about how they want to approach this. They are going to get that lightning energy onto the Eevee. And they've got the Eevee bag that they're considering playing here. can either restore 20 health from any evolutions that have taken damage, or it can allow the offensive evolution to do an additional 10. They're having a look at the Lunatone. They're unaware that there's a Lusamine in hand for the Constrictors. They're going to play the Eevee bag. They're going to restore the health of Vaporeon because they know that that Moon Press from Lunatone only does 50 damage. And they're going with the Hyper Whirlpool. They will still get to flip the coin to determine if there's any energy discarded from the Shiinotic, but we know that's going to happen because it's going to be discarded from the match. And again, the Allies have taken the first battle point over the Constrictors. And they are in fact going to move the Lunatone into the active spot. They have not gone with the Necrozma, a very interesting choice here from the Constrictors. Again, they need to not rush these turns. That cost them from being able to get even a single battle point in the previous game with this Moon Press setup though. Again, they've got that Lusamine. Can't help but wonder what they were thinking. We can see it there on the screen for that brief moment. They do have those discarded energy, but with the Lusamine, they get them onto the Necrozma, and they do go with the Moon Press onto the Vaporeon. Vaporeon still has 10 health remaining, which means it can still capitalize on that Hyper Whirlpool. Charger Bug just being pulled for the Allies. Still no Grubbin in sight yet as the water energy is starting to be produced by the Allies. They are going to get Glaceon online, but it still requires one more. They can go for this Hyper Whirlpool. This will guarantee that Vaporeon is left with the poisoning as well. Lunatone, they will need to flip the coin, and it's a Tails immediately from the Allies. So Lunatone still has both of its energy. The poisoning is going to take out Vaporeon. So the Constrictors were thinking ahead when setting up Lunatone, knowing that it could outlast the Vaporeon, but they had to run the risk of possibly losing those energy on Lunatone here. The Constrictors pulling the Oricoro, they get the third energy onto the Necrozma, and they're going to retreat Lunatone immediately. They've got the Beastite in hand if they want to maximize their damage. They almost didn't, but this time they have slowed down to get the Beastite. This will allow that Psych ability to do 120 damage to Glaceon. The Psych ability was going to take it out regardless, but I apologize, there's only been 1 point taken, but because the Allies have got an empty bench, that second point has allowed the Constrictors to win the game due to the Allies' empty bench. And with our final table reset, it is going to be the Constrictors going first, and they are going to be using that Thrifty Treats deck going up against the Team Friendship deck of the Holon Allies, as the Milcery is being moved into the active spot for the Constrictors, the Compe on the bench, the Drillbar into the active spot for the Allies. This deck generating Psychic and Metal type energy. They've already got the Excadrill in hand, but again, they need a basic Pokemon. We just saw what happens when you have an empty bench. You lose the game immediately if you lose your active Pokemon. The Professor's research allows the Alcremie, the second one, and the Poison Barb to be pulled for the Constrictors. They get the Poison Barb onto the Milcery as well. They want to deter Drillbur from going on the offensive again. They have got that Excadrill in hand, the leftovers being pulled, and we know now that on their next turn a Metal Energy will be produced. The Scratch will do 10 damage to the Milcery, but Drillbur will have to contend with the poisoning here. Now, Alcremie only does require 1 energy, but the catch with that Sweets Overload, it needs Sweets Relay to have been performed at least once to do 40 damage. For every time we see Sweets Relay in this contest, there will be an additional 40 that Alcremie is capable of doing, as they do get that first energy onto the Milcery here. Now, there's no point in getting Alcremie online because it won't be able to do anything, so that Sweets Relay is going to do 10 damage to the Drillbur, the Poisoning, bringing it down to 30 health. It comes back over to the Allies, who pulled the Escavalier, but that's not what they're worried about. They want this Excadrill online. It only requires 1 Metal Energy, so that Psychic Energy is currently useless as they put the leftovers onto the Excadrill as well. We've seen that in play many a time. That will restore 10 health at the end of every turn of the Allies. They get the Metal Energy, and with the Slash and the Weakness coming into play as well, 70 damage onto the Milcery. Now, Excadrill has to contend with the fact that it is left with this poisoning as well, but the Constrictors need to pull a basic Pokemon because Compe is also weak to Excadrill. And there is that leftovers restoring 10 health being offset by the poisoning here, and the Constrictors, they pull a Milcery. This is perfect. They need this to come into play just so they can at least set up Alcremie somewhat here, but Compe, we know, cannot outlast a hit from Excadrill. Now, hovering that energy though, thinking about how they want to approach this, they do decide to put that energy onto the Milcery. There's the 10 damage onto the Excadrill, who can continue to slash through the Laverre Constrictors at the moment, and this Thrifty Treats deck, the EVEX being pulled for the allies, immediately moved on to the bench, and it is going to receive that metal energy, those continuing to be produced by the energy zone of the allies. Another slash and another battle point here for the allies. They are 1 point away from taking this series and taking game 3. The Constrictors need to get 3 consecutive battle points to take the win. They've moved that Milcery into the active spot. They've got the Alcremie, and they need to get Alcremie online because Milcery cannot outlast a hit from Excadrill. The big Malasada being pulled for the Constrictors. Alcremie will be capable of doing 40 damage with the Sweets Overload, as we've only seen the Sweets Relay once in this matchup. It does receive an energy, like we said, 40 damage for every Sweets Relay. And there's that 40 damage onto Excadrill, an additional 10 for the Poisoning. And the Sylveon now being pulled for the Holon Allies. They've also got the Espeon in hand. They both require at least 1 Psychic Energy onto the Eevee, and they have to evolve it here. They've also got the Leafeon in hand. And Leafeon can only do 10 damage. The allies thinking about how they want to approach this. They are going to get a second energy onto the EVX. They have to evolve it here. They've gone with the Leafeon. Now Leafeon will only do 10. It does get powered up if there's grass type energy on it, but there are no grass type energy produced from this deck. They do get that 70 damage onto the Alcremie. There is the leftovers restoring 10 health, but the poisoning offsetting that. The Swirlix being pulled for the Constrictors here. They do get that Swirlix online. They've got those Slurpuff in hand as well. They get a first energy onto the Swirlix. They're going to retreat the Alcremie. It's only 1 energy to do so, so it still has the 1 energy it needs. They're going to be able to get another Sweets Relay off, which is fantastic for them because that means they can continue to make that Sweets Overload more powerful. The Poisoning is going to finish off Excadrill, and it will be Leafeon moved into the active spot for the allies. They've got an empty bench again, but they only need 1 point. The Excadrill is pulled. They're producing metal energy still, and this will only do 10 damage to this Leaf Blast. It does an additional 20 for each grass energy. There's 10 damage onto the Swirlix. It is going to come back to the Constrictors. They pulled the Compact. They've got the Slurpuff, who does 30 damage with the Sweets Relay, unless on the previous turn it was performed, which we did see. This will allow it to do an additional 60 damage. They're looking through their hand, but this does 90 damage, and this is going to discard Leafeon from the board. The Constrictors hold on. They only had to get 2 consecutive points because, again, an empty board for the allies has cost them in game 3. This is going to move the Constrictors up into 5th place, as next round they are going up against the top of the leaderboard, Pastoria Hydros. Whereas for the allies, they are moved up to 10th place, but next round they're going up against the reigning champions, the Cinnamon Blazers. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what cards you pulled today, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.